with Zach Mumbach at the Dead Space 2 booth. And Zach, first off, we're all so happy, I think, to hear that there's a sequel coming out for the original Dead Space after just an awesome cliffhanger ending there at the end. How excited are you guys now that we're getting so close to the launch?
I mean, this is like the best part. We've got the public beta out for multiplayer, so we're getting like actual data back from users. We're able to bring it to like places like this and see people play it. I mean, we've been working on this game basically ever since we finished Dead Space 1. We got right to it, and you know that's a couple years now where we're just locked in dark rooms making a game and not really, you know, what we do this for is the fans and getting that feedback. So being able to actually start showing it off, and you know, it's coming out in January, so you know, we all can kind of feel that date coming. It's starting to get really, really exciting.
Very cool. Now, you mentioned the multiplayer beta. Of course, one of the biggest, you know, complaints, I guess, about the first one was there was no multiplayer, so it was kind of a necessity in the second one. What planning went into making the multiplayer, and you know, what inspires you guys to have kind of where, you know, you're fighting against your friends can be bad guys, and
right.
and you can also defend an area. Talk about the development of the multiplayer.
Yeah, so obviously the first one came out and the fans demanded multiplayer, and like, okay, we're gonna do multiplayer, but we had to do multiplayer that was right for Dead Space, you know, like I love Halo, I play a lot of Halo, but we can't just do what Halo does because it just wouldn't feel right for what our franchise is. So, you know, we kind of had to, you know, put our heads together and figure that out. We obviously played a ton of other multiplayer games. Left 4 Dead was a great influence, you know, played Gears of War doing the Horde mode and like, you know, these different modes, and us being able to look at those and kind of like, you know, be inspired by these other different games. And like I said, we wanted to feel like Dead Space. And then when the idea came, okay, let's do humans versus necromorphs and let people actually play as the necromorphs, then once we had that idea, it just started rolling.
Now, of course, the necromorphs, one of the more inventive, I guess, zombie horror, survival horror enemies, and you have to take out their legs and their arms, not their body part, not their head and torso. It's like, what was the inspiration for that, and what kind of new necromorphs might we see in Dead Space 2?
Yeah, so, you know, I think that doing just like the typical zombie where you just shoot them up, that's cool and everything, but we wanted something that would stand out and be different for our game, and that's how dismemberment and the strategic dismemberment and stasis and all that stuff sort of came into play. We definitely have some new enemies, some new bosses. We've been showing off in the demo here. People are seeing the Puker. You can guess what the Puker does, and he's got a really cool... One of the things that fans really liked about the first Dead Space was all the different custom deaths that Isaac had when you would fail. So the new enemies all have we got some cool stuff.
Very cool. Now, of course, the great thing about all these games is the different kinds of weapons you can use. I mean, there were some very inventive weapons because, of course, Isaac's an engineer. He's not really a soldier. Yeah. So he kind of makeshift some of his tools into weapons. What kind of new goodies can we see for Isaac in Dead Space 2? So we've been showing off the railgun, which is the gun that you can impale people with, and it shoots spears, and you can basically stick guys to walls. And then its alt fire is if you skewer somebody, you can alt fire and it'll electrocute them, which is pretty cool. We've got a couple other things that we're not talking about yet. We got to keep a few tricks up the sleeve before we come out. You know, we don't want to spoil it all. And for people who may not be aware, just refresh people's memory on what the plot is of Dead Space 2. Of course, Isaac got off the planet at the end of Dead Space 1, and like I mentioned before, there was a bit of a cliffhanger surprise ending there that I'm not going to spoil for anybody who I don't know, who hasn't played Dead Space 1 yet, but...
Go play it. Go play it.
Come on, for real.
You can get it cheap now. Like, go play Dead Space 1.
Exactly, because Dead Space 2 coming out in January. So... tell us a little bit about the plot of Dead Space 2.
Sure, so the game takes place 3 years later, and you start off as Isaac, and you wake up, and you're not really sure what's gone on the last 3 years, or what's going on right then and there. And again, Isaac is thrown into kind of a crazy situation, and things, you know, are revealed as he goes along, and it just, we roll from there. I don't want to spoil the story because it's such a big part of what Dead Space is. You know, it's the story, the lore, like, you know, we've got the comic books and the novels and the movies, and all those things kind of play into this overall big story arc we're doing with Isaac.
Now, you mentioned the comic books and everything, and how is it, you know, how do you guys feel as a developer to see your product inspire all these different forms of media beyond video games?
Yeah, it's one of the coolest things that can happen as a developer, and you know, I've been in the industry 10 years. Dead Space 2, like, without a doubt, is the best game I've ever worked on, and when we see like the game we're making inspire like animated movies and comic books, and there's a novel, Dead Space Martyr, out, and it's just really cool, and I think it's really cool for the fans too, because there's so much fiction and lore behind the franchise. We can't squeeze it all into the games. The games, you know, we've got to keep moving the games ahead, so all that backstory and stuff is accessible for fans, which I think is great.
Zach, man, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. Dead Space 2 comes out January 2011. Be sure to pick it up.